hallucination technology, if I put it that way, and combine these two, basically portraying, who knows, right? The figure of God in the sky, what have you, and then the speech comes through as well. Speculations on that, John? Do you think that ever will be will they be able to pull such a stunt off? What do you think?
Well, certainly that seems the direction that they're headed with it. If you look at everything that's happening collectively, we've got technology that is obviously designed to control large populations. We've got every government trying to focus on either chipping or biometric identification cards. In our country, one of the things that we never thought we would see with our current administration, they're wanting to control our car companies, control our banks, control our health care, which in the U.S. is unheard of. Everything is going toward a one-world government form of government where the population is controlled. Even the Copenhagen meeting that our president went on based on global warming, one of the things that came out of that meeting, at least what was presented to us, that they see the best way to prevent global warming is through depopulation. And if you look at our current administration with Barack Obama, he's created all these czar positions, and most of these people are former eugenicists. Our director of the science czar, John Holdren, has actually written books on depopulation and eugenics, that they feel the world is overpopulated, and he's written books that go in detail on how we can have forced abortion and forced sterility. So, this is not science fiction, this is fact, and it appears that we are looking at technology that's being studied for use in a one-world government.
So what you're saying in one way is that they're laying the infrastructure, they're laying down the technology that potentially is going to be used later on to control the small amount of people that potentially are left if their plans actually go through, so to speak.
And actually, I have spoken to a Dr. Robert Duncan, who was a former DARPA scientist who worked on this technology. His take on this is that everyone is already relatively controllable using this technology, that the people being victimized are the subset of the population that are not receptive to the technology. And if he's right, that's a very scary theory, because that's already saying that they already know how to control the majority of the population, that it is the people that they see as a threat because it doesn't work on that population, that are the people that are being gang-stalked, being attacked, and being made to look delusional so no one listens to them.
Yeah. And what do you think about controlling people more directly then? If we, it's another level to this as well. If we only talked about harassment, that's one area. But how about controlling obviously people's thoughts as well, and obviously even maybe the way people, where they choose to walk, for instance, in one way bypassing the idea of free will and the fact that we are making choices and so forth, that we can be totally aligned because of incoming signals to our brain, so to speak. Do you think that that's a possibility as well, John?
I think it's already happening. If you look at some of the victims and what they describe and some of their personality changes, including my ex-fiancée, who was totally controlled, as I write in the book, her personality changed overnight. She went from being a non-drinker to drinking near fatal amounts of alcohol, especially after I identified the group that was stalking her and exposing her to this technology. They needed to get rid of her, but obviously couldn't murder her outright after I had already been to the police. So they began controlling her to drink near fatal amounts of alcohol, controlling her by causing her to fall asleep at the wheel of her vehicle. They were, at several occasions, they actually electronically shut down the computer of her car while she was on the highway. That's a very common thing that we've seen. That's been experienced by myself and by Dr. Don Rawmaker when we got into this fight against this technology. Your ECU in your car is electronic, and with bombarded by the right amount of energy, it can make your car shut off. It can make your transmission shift at the wrong time. And in this particular female, after identifying them as her rapist, they actually shut her car down at highway speed on the highway on several occasions with her having to pull over into the median of the highway emergently to avoid a fatal accident.
Was that with some kind of OnStar system, or did they do that remotely just by knocking out the electronics in the car, or what? Do you know?
That's done remotely just by knocking out the electronics in the car. You do not need OnStar for that to happen because they're tracking the individual. As long as the individual that's being tracked is in the vehicle, then the vehicle is being tracked as well.
How do they track the individuals then? I mean, in some cases, there's speculation that some people actually have a chip inside of them. But in other cases, we hear stories about the fact that your biometrical signature, so to speak, can be tracked. We can talk about, as you mentioned before, the fact that you have a unique brainwave pattern. But even the way you walk and things like that can also be picked up by various systems that they're trying out now. But in terms of the research that you've done, what's your theory or what do you know in terms of how they actually track people, John?
We have checked people for implanted microchips for quite some time. Everyone that's victimized by this technology immediately thinks that there has to be a homing beacon or a microchip in them that has to be honed in on to be able to track them. What we're finding, and this is from talking to people who worked on the technology in DARPA, that it is being done with biosensing satellite systems that can sense your body frequency and can actually sense your EEG or brain fingerprint. You know, everyone's EEG is slightly different. It gives off a different ELF wave signature. When you have a thought, electricity goes through the brain. That is how we read an EEG, which we've been able to do for a long time. And it also gives off an ELF wave signature that can be used specifically from person to person. Another former DARPA scientist that worked on this technology told me that what they actually do or can do is transmit a frequency that stays inside your brain or in your body and slowly degrades over time, but they use the transmitted frequency that resonates within the body to do the tracking, along with brain fingerprinting. And you're right, for years we've had optical tracking, which is based on body recognition and facial recognition. So, and that's been around for 20 years. So if you take it a little bit further, it's not really too hard to grasp the concept that everyone has a different brain fingerprint, just like a physical fingerprint.
Do you think that would it be enough to get the records, let's say from a doctor or a hospital, if someone previously had an EEG, for example, or is there another way that they can scan your brain, so to speak, remotely as well? Or because obviously they have to have one of these aspects first. Either they have to know exactly where you're at to hone in and target in on you, or they kind of search for you, if you will, because of the brainwave pattern that you're sending out. But what do you think in terms of that, John?
Oh, the initial targeting, at least what we're seeing in this country, since this technology is being dealt out to criminal elements, or what we're finding is mostly private investigative groups or large international law firms who use private investigators. Once it's dealt out to a community level, those people target whoever they want to target. If they're hired to target somebody, that person becomes the target. If there's somebody they don't like, that person becomes the target. In our case here in San Antonio, it was a woman that they wanted to sexually assault. She became the target. So the initial choosing of the target is not necessarily at random, but it's at the whim of the criminals that have been given access to the technology. Now, once they've been by your house, they've GPSed your house, they hone in on you with the satellite surveillance. And once your EEG is processed remotely, put into the system, then you're followed and messed with wherever you go.
What do you make of other emerging technologies? We can talk a little bit about RFID, but also I'm interested to hear if you've heard about haptic devices before. We can talk about smart houses, for instance, with touch-sensitive walls, or an office building with sensors in the floor, which again actually can recognize by the pattern, the way you walk, who it is who's walking on that floor. Have you heard about these things before, John?
Yes, I have, and they've actually talked about using that as part of our new green environment in the United States to save energy by putting those kind of systems in the homes, along with remotely controlled thermostats to save energy, where you essentially would really not have any control over your air conditioning or your heating. They would be able to use the haptic sensors to be able to tell how many people are in the household, whether they need to set your temperature for you,